Hey guys, it's Canadian Kyle here at the Wealth Hoarders Podcast, and today I'm joined with Rick Trotman. He is the CEO of Barksdale Resources, ticker symbol is BRO on the TSXV and BRKCF on the OTC. Now I had Rick back on episode 8 of the podcast, so early times for me, but a lot has happened since then for Barksdale. A little bit of turbulence, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel. Some things are clearing up, and I'm excited to have Rick back on to retell his story. So welcome back, my friend.
Yeah, it's great to be back. I can't believe it's been that long. Like episode 8. What's
Six.
What episode is this one now?
This will be 47. So
okay.
And
awesome.
At least one a week, sometimes 2. But yeah, so it's been some time. How are the kids? How's everything going back home? How was your summer?
Summer was awesome. Yeah, it was really great. We just moved house last week, so it's stressful. But other than that, can't complain. Everyone is happy. They're all at school, including my wife, who's a teacher. So
good.
Yeah, happy family. That's all you need at the end of the day.
I know I was hearing kids running in the background last time we chatted, so that's good. House to yourself now. But Rick, I usually ask first-time guests what they were doing when they were my age. You're a recurring guest, and I've been struggling to figure out what's a good question to ask a recurring guest. So maybe the listeners out there, leave a comment in the comment section below, because I'm trying to figure out what's a good recurring question to ask guests that come back on the program. A question I could ask any guest. Haven't quite figured it out yet, so maybe you guys can help me out. But Rick, we have a lot to chat about today, and I want to get into the Regal Resources right away. Get that out of the way, and I want to talk about it because it sounded like a lot of people thought that proposal was going to go through, where Barksdale would become one entity. Turns out that didn't happen, and now I read on a news release that there's a default notice sent to Regal. So what's going on with them?
Yeah, it was pretty unfortunate, Kyle. So look, at the end of the day, what we wanted to happen back at the beginning of the summer was exactly what you said, to put kind of all of the assets under one roof and go forward, everyone paddling in the same direction, right? And try to maximize the value of the Sunnyside asset. And we thought we put together a hell of a deal for both Regal shareholders and Barksdale shareholders. You know, we would have extinguished all of Regal's debts, and they had quite a few. And they would have been Barksdale's biggest shareholder. You know, they would have been linked to the hip of Barksdale. And, you know, if we got the stock up, everyone would make money. We got the majority of the vote on that deal, but we didn't get the supermajority necessary to ultimately complete the transaction. And so that was, it was quite deflating, honestly. You know, the folks in charge of Regal on the management side, you know, we spent many a months putting that deal together, and it was tricky and complicated, and there were tons of issues, but we sifted through it all and structured something that was fantastic. And yeah, it was quite deflating to not get there. But as a bit of a insurance policy, so to speak, just to make sure we were not doing it all for naught, we went ahead and bought the largest piece of secured debt that Regal had issued to date from an existing creditor. And that was, you know, some people call it a poison pill, others, you know, just an insurance blanket. But effectively, we wanted to make sure that if the transaction didn't go through, that we had something to hang our hat on. And so, you know, obviously the transaction didn't go through. So we are now the largest creditor to Regal. They owe us $1.725 million plus all the accrued interest, which is, I think, probably over $100,000 at this point. And the debts come due. So they have kind of fallen down a bit, and they are having trouble raising money. And so when the debt forbearance period ended on October 2nd, we sent them a notice saying, you've got 10 days to pay us back. So ultimately they couldn't do that. Their fundraising efforts were not as successful as they had hoped. And so they went into kind of a voluntary filing. So it's kind of the precursor to bankruptcy, effectively. So at this point, there are 2 paths ahead of us, Kyle. Our investment is completely safe. So, you know, that's first and foremost. I want to just make sure that that's out there. But for Regal, there's 2 paths. One, they're going to either be able to raise the money to pay us back, as well as all the other creditors, and they owe almost $3 million. So it's quite the it's quite the challenge for a company in their position to raise that type of money, only to be broke the next day, right? They'd have to raise in excess of what they owe effectively, right? So they're either going to raise that money and pay us back, which will be, a positive for Barksdale because we'll get all of that money back into our treasury and we'll deploy that capital, at San Javier drilling and get some great results out of it. Or they're not going to be able to. And ultimately, if they're in that situation, the end result of that is that a judge will effectively declare them bankrupt, put a trustee in to run the company, and it'll liquidate all their assets in order to pay back the creditors. So that sounds dreary and god awful to most of the people that are probably listening to you, but ultimately it's not a bad thing for Barksdale. We are a secured creditor, so we have protections. And if that auction actually occurs, we can do one of two things. We can actually bid in the auction and try to win the asset ourselves. And if that was the case, we'd have the opportunity of potentially buying the asset for a lot less than we were willing to pay for it this summer. Or two, someone else will, beat us in that auction. We'll get paid back and we'll have a different joint venture partner going forward. And presumably one that is, well-financed and credible and, has, kind of the best business interest at heart, i.e. they want to make money, right? And so at the end of the day, that's fantastic, either case for us.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think it would be a large company like a South32 that would buy that other part? I'm just wondering how much leverage you have if it's, because you own 51% of the Sunnyside property, right? Then there's a 49%. So I'm just wondering, is there any case where this might not be good for Barksdale shareholders for another partner? If you have another partner like Regal,
Oh yeah, look, if we had another company come in that was like Regal, or sorry, let me restate that is like Regal was back in the day when all the shenanigans happened. Yeah, that would be a negative for Barksdale because ultimately we have a credible partner in there that has, a good reputation and the ability to, kind of pursue their own business endeavors, and make hay when the sun shines. We don't want any negative drag on the asset, right? Whether it's from ourselves or from our joint venture partner, if we were to have another one. So that would probably be worst case, Kyle, is just if someone else comes in there that we don't like, but hard to see that happen. If someone's going to go into a bidding process for Sunnyside, should it actually get there, I would imagine that they'd be well capitalized and, a good group at the end of the day. And most of the groups that would bid for an asset like this, we would end up probably knowing them directly or knowing of them. So I'm sure that, savvy business people would be in the seat.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And then if we were actually successful in actually, winning the auction, then we would just own 100% of Sunnyside.
That'd be ideal.
It's not a bad outcome either, right?
No, this is a lesson for me because this is the first company I was looking at where I'd see this actually go to this stage with Regal. And I'm just thinking, man, it would have sucked to own Regal shares. You said the majority vote you won, but even then you're looking at management's making the best decisions for shareholders. And it sounded like the majority wanted it, but it wasn't the super majority or whatever you mentioned. So just a lesson for sure.
Yeah. Well, and look, at the end of the day, it's a lesson to folks to ensure that they understand things correctly before they go and vote. Because at the end of the day, some of these folks voted down the transaction because they thought other things were going to happen, and those things didn't pan out. And it's pretty bad when you don't have a plan B, right?
For sure.
And we offered them $20 million of value at the end of the day, and now they're sitting on the precipice of a bankruptcy. That would be a hard pill to swallow, if you were sitting in the seat and you voted yes on that transaction, right? And that was the ultimate outcome. I would be livid. So hopefully it doesn't get there for Regal shareholders. If it does, Barksdale shareholders won't be too unhappy. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's just unfortunately, that we couldn't have done it just cleanly, simply, and all made money together. I mean, that's the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And why don't you remind people that, or for people that might have just heard Barksdale's story for the first time here, remind people of the Sunnyside project. What does it consist of? Where's the location? Just tell us about Sunnyside.
Yeah, Sunnyside is a base metal asset in Arizona. It's we've got a copper porphyry that's quite big. But the most intriguing part of it is the deposit that's sitting off the flank of that porphyry. It's called a skarn, transitions into a carbonate replacement deposit, and it's quite high grade. It doesn't have very many holes into it, but what's important about it is that a kilometer away, it effectively transitions onto another group's property, and they have a world-class asset on the other side of the fence. So it's a monster, or it could be a monster, right? Where it's sitting next to and is a part of a known monster. So the potential there is just fantastic. And we're in permitting right now to try to get the ability to go in and actually drill so that we can show just how big the deposit could be on our side of the fence. And that's kind of the current situation.
How was the permit going? We were talking about it last time. Did any progress on the permitting since we chatted last?
Yeah. So we had our public comment periods. They all went well. They concluded, all the comments have been dealt with. Right now, we're waiting for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to complete a biological assessment. And so for all those technical folks that are out there, basically there's some threatened species that are in the area, Mexican spotted owl and such. And so we've done a lot of work to characterize, the animals that are there and their habitat, and have put together a bunch of plans to make sure that we don't disrupt them. And so Forest Service has taken those plans, they've added to it, they've done a bunch of analysis, and then they've submitted their conclusions to Fish and Wildlife, who have the ultimate say when it comes to threatened and endangered species. And so we're waiting for them to say whether or not they agree with the U.S. Forest Service. And that will then allow the Forest Service to move forward and finish out the permitting process, which shouldn't actually take too long once we get that report back from Fish and Wildlife Service. It should be a matter of 2 months, 3 months maybe.
Very cool.
So we're getting, I see the light at the end of the tunnel, Kyle. Like it's been years coming, and like we're this close. So it's extremely frustrating that I can't give you better guidance, because I don't know when Fish and Wildlife is going to deliver that damn report. But once they do, then I can actually give you more specificity as to when that final permit will be issued. So it's coming. It's coming, and once we know, you'll know. Barksdale shareholders have been waiting a long time for this one, so it'll be a momentous occasion.
For sure. And you have some long-term shareholders, which is reassuring too. Before we get into that, I do want to talk about your other Arizona project. You have San Antonio. And I just have one question. I heard that South32 acquired more properties around San Antonio. Is that true?
Yeah, they staked the entire eastern side of that property. So we bought San Antonio from Tech Resources a couple of years ago, and Tech had staked San Antonio and done a bunch of geophysical work on it. Looks like there's a potential for a porphyry to be sitting just under some shallow gravels. And at the time, everything to the east was open, and South32 has gone in there and staked pretty much everything that's on the federal side. So we're kind of circled down there at the project now.
Very cool. And like you said, some Barksdale shareholders were waiting some time, lights at the end of the tunnel. But last time we talked, you were talking about a drill program. You never done any with Barksdale. Now you have one with the new San Javier property. Congratulations on that. Didn't say congrats on that yet, but you got this new San Javier property, and you have a drill program, and you just released results. And I think a lot of people are interested in hearing what you have to say about that. But before we get into the results, why don't you tell us about the drill program? How many meters? Where'd you drill? Just tell us about the program.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's astonishing that I've been at Barksdale for almost 4 years, and we had never drilled a hole before, right? I mean, tell me one other exploration company that's kind of survived that long without doing anything on the drilling front, right? And so it's just been completely perplexing to me. Like I've just been craving, to get a drill bit in the ground, and finally it has happened at San Javier down in Mexico, and it's the first results. As far as putting out the first drill holes in corporate history, I was very pleased that the ones that we put out were better than my expectations, quite honestly. So the first 2 holes we put out, I think it was Monday. We had 105 meters of 0.63% copper, and these are oxides, right? So fantastic hole. And that included a couple of intervals of some pretty high grade gold as well. I think there was 21 meters of 1.5 grams. There was another 27 meters, I think, of like 2 gram gold.
Yeah.
And that's kind of coalescing into a nice zone. So this is everything that we wanted out of the first couple of holes, right? We wanted to show that some of these big areas that had drilling on the edges could be fleshed out with additional high grade mineralization. So we checked that box. We wanted to show that gold zone had some continuity. So that way we could go back to some of the historic holes and start pulling pulps and seeing if we can flesh out that gold zone. So we've checked the box there. And then we also wanted to test these structures where we saw high grades before, right? But the old data that we had, we couldn't make heads or tails as to whether the high grade structures are vertical or horizontal or what. And so now we've actually drilling in there that we can see that the structures are more horizontal, and that kind of aggregates some of those higher grades. And so we are now armed with all the information that we need to go out and drill this thing and make it bigger and better, and then take all of those concepts out to some of the prospects that are further afield on the property itself. So like we're checking the boxes on San Javier, and it feels fantastic. And we've got 24 holes, maybe 25 today that are done. And yeah. So we're drilling the heck out of it. Some of these are short holes, mind you. But I think we've got 15 holes at the lab, more or less. And so we're going to have results out every couple of weeks. And this is going to go, the drill program itself will probably last at least another month. And we'll probably have assays coming out well into next year, probably at least January, if not into February.
And I think I missed, how many meters was it that it was?
5,000 meter program.
5,000. Very cool. Yeah. And assays till the next year. And what got you excited about San Javier? Because I know Sunnyside was your baby. That was like the main focus. And some people might have been wondering, oh, why did he purchase San Javier? So what did you see in that property? The property was off the radar. So it was known to a lot of people, but it hadn't been worked in such a long time that people kind of forgot it existed. It hadn't been drilled since the early 2000s. And even back then it was getting great results, but it was in a company that wasn't doing well. So it was kind of always this neglected child, so to speak. And I saw the opportunity to take a project that had a lot of historical data that we could kind of reinterpret and then push forward really fast into an upwardly rising copper chart. And that's exactly what's happened. We were delayed at the beginning because of COVID, getting everything going, but everything is working out the way that I thought, as far as copper prices and on the site, looking at all the historic data and what we can do with this thing. I think it's gonna play out well. I think that 25,000 meters historically that's been put into Cerro Verde, when we complement it with the 5,000 meters that we're putting into it right now, we're going to be able to go out there and put together the geology really well, show where the extension potential exists, probably have a resource out early next year, and then start moving off into the actual development studies. Because we're running column tests right now as well. So we'll get recovery data back early next year. And for those that don't know what a column test is, we've taken a bunch of drill core that kind of meets kind of like a deposit wide average grade, so to speak. And we send it to another laboratory, they crush it all down, and then they load it into these
large diameter PVC pipes that imitate the height of a heap leach pad. And then they percolate acid down through it, recreating that heap leach process. And ultimately the copper is dissolved and comes out the bottom, and they test it periodically, and you develop these recovery curves. And so this takes 3 or 4 months to do. So we started that right off the bat because we had so much faith that this deposit could actually be something. It could be more than a deposit. It could be an actual project that's ultimately put into production. So we wanted to get those numbers right off the bat. So we have started the column testing already. And so I think they're 120-day columns. So we'll get data every 30 days, and back in, what would that be, January, we will have the final recovery numbers. So those are the components necessary to put forward a PEA and things of that nature, right?
Right. Okay. Very cool. And you did touch on the meter, that recent hole, 105 meters at 0.6% copper. For the non-geologists out there, that maybe they were looking at gold exploration companies, they're used to grams per ton.
Yep.
Just how great is this hole, 0.6 at 105 meters? What is that telling you?
Yeah, so I would say most heap leach copper, assets that are in production right now are probably, 0.2%, 0.3%, copper oxides that are on the heap leach. So to get something that's 0.6, is fantastic. When you look at it in, say, gold terms, right? It's probably, because it's 0.6 copper and 0.4 gold, it's probably the equivalent of 2 gram gold,
right?
Over 100 meters, more or less. I mean, I'd have to actually the gold equivalent calculation, but yeah, 1% copper is 22 pounds, right? And so at $4.50 a pound, that's, you're looking at $90 a ton. So for a potential open pit project, that's spectacular. Yeah, even at 0.6, so that's what, $45 a ton. That works. That really works. So so look, the more of that type of material that we can find, the better, right? I mean, ultimately we want to make this thing, we want to find all those cherry zones, we want to bulk them up as big as possible, and then we want to show that this could be mined with low strip ratio and all those things that you want to see, right? So this is step one. Step one is complete. We know that there's copper. We're drilling copper right now, and so now we just have to show how big it is.
Yeah, and it's good you got this asset. Like you said, copper prices ran up like you thought they would, and I don't know if we'll see them below $4 for some time now. They're a little bit above $4. Now, let's just put this thought out there. Someone's looking at a copper exploration company. Seems interesting. Barksdale seems interesting. But copper is what, 430, 440 today? It seems a little high. Am I too late to the party? Should I even be getting into a copper exploration play at this point? What do you have to say to someone with that thought process? It's a fair assumption.
Yeah, it's completely fair. It just depends on how long you think the copper market is going to stay lofty. I guess my response to that would be, it takes years for companies to put projects into production. So, just because copper, started going up at the beginning of this year, it doesn't mean that you can turn the Titanic, so to speak, and start pumping out more copper from existing mines, or even build new mines, which sometimes take 2, 3, 4 years to bring online. So the cure to high prices is always high prices, right? And so eventually the copper production will come online to meet demand, and prices will settle down. But I think it's going to take some time. I think it's going to take a couple of years. And so, I think that there's a runway here.
Sure, I agree. Before we get into the vault, why don't you remind us about your market cap, cash in the bank, shareholder structure, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So I think today we're 39.40 cents. So we're probably 25 million Canadian market cap, more or less. Quick on math on the fly. Shareholders, we have quite the list. We've got a stable of very patient, very incredible shareholders that have been with us since 2017 for the most part, because they see the prize at the end of the road when it comes to Sunnyside and getting that permit and starting to drill there. So the register right now is comprised of Tech Resources and Osisco Development Corp. They combined have around 20%. Who else is in there? We have a bunch of institutional funds like US Global. Eric Sprott is in there, and that's from 2017 as well. Medalist Capital, US Global, Delbrook Capital, Crestcat Capital, a number of different funds. We've got a lot of mining entrepreneurs that have put their markers down. $500,000 or 1 million shares, a piece. I won't name their names just because we want to respect them. And then management has about 5% as well. And then Regal Resources has some shares of ours that are held in escrow as well. So, I'd say probably 50 to 60% of the stock is in very stable and supportive hands. Let's put it that way. Yep. And then on the cash side, we've got, not including the $1.8 million Regal investment in their debt, probably got a little less than $2 million. And our drilling program down at San Javier is, probably 60 to 65% done at this point and paid for. So I've got plenty of money to finish off that campaign and keep on trucking.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see what's more to come with those assay results. I want to thank you again, Rick, for coming on and retelling your story to my audience. I do have the recurrent segment. It's called The Vault, as you've been in it once before.
Yep.
Just 3 mentorship-like questions, not related to Barksdale or the drill results or anything like that. It's just mentorship-like questions that I try and gain life advice and value from each of my guests. Sorry. So without further ado, let's get into The Vault.
Yeah, fire away.
So, like I said, 3 questions in the vault. First question is, what do you think is something someone should do at least once in their life?
Riding a helicopter.
Yeah?
Yeah, scares the living daylights out of me, but Jesus, it's a wild ride. Especially if you're in there with some, former, kind of Air Force, pilot or someone like that that's a bit crazy, or Australians just in general. Holy Lord, yeah. I've been in a couple of choppers with Australian pilots and they put you through the motions. Goodness, I hate riding in helicopters, but it's thrilling. Yeah.
Okay, I gotta give it a try. Yeah, I've never been in one, so it sounds real fun. Not just a tour around the city either, I bet. Just
No. Go out to one of these mining projects, Kyle, and get them to fly you around in a helicopter, right? And oh yeah, it's
crazy.
Fun. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, second question. We are the Wealth Wars podcast. So what is something that makes you feel wealthy as an individual besides money?
Besides the family. Yeah, you can have all the money in the world, but if you're not happy at home, what are you doing it for? Yeah. Right? Yeah, I don't want to make money for me to, go buy a yacht or anything like that. I want to do it because I want to make sure that my family has, the means to do whatever they want to do, or, they can pursue whatever they want to pursue during the course of their life. So everything I do is for my family. So that's the key to my happiness anyway.
Yeah, never lose sight in family for sure, 100%. Last question for the young listeners out there, or any listeners out there, they're probably investors or speculators in the resource space. So I think this is a good question to ask. Any advice or insight about delayed gratification or patience? It just seems like today everyone is impatient nowadays. What's that saying? The expression "good things come to those who wait" doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, and if there's anyone that knows anything about patience, it's me. Good Lord. 4 years waiting on this permit in Arizona, right? It's like watching a slow moving glacier, crawl uphill on a cold winter day. use it as an opportunity. You know, patience is something that, just like you said, most people don't have. They're in it for the moment. They're in and out of stocks on a, you know, weekly, monthly, you know, biannual basis. They don't hold they're viewed as a trading game at the end of the day. And use it as an opportunity, you know, accumulate when people panic and they sell, and wait for the actual catalysts to mature, right? So I would say, just, you know, everything can be viewed as a positive or negative. You need to make the everything into a positive to your benefit. So same thing with patience. Use it if you
Good
can
answer.
withstand the urges.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. And sometimes it's like just that selling too early is a little tricky because you're like, oh, you know what? I'm already up 40% on this, but like you say, the catalysts haven't even begun yet. It's interesting.
Yeah, but you know, like it's a tricky one because, you know, I've also been a part of things where, you know, you sell, you know, up 40% and you think you are God's gift to investing, and then, you know, the stock over the next 2 years goes up tenfold, right? And it makes you question yourself and your motivations and your tactics. But there's an old saying that, you know, you never lose sleep over the money you make, right? It's always the ones you get wrong that you lose the sleep over. So, you know, develop an investment thesis, stick to it, never be afraid of taking cash off the table, right? Playing with house money is always fantastic, but yeah, be patient, let things play out the way you thought they were going to. Let I guess the thesis develop based on what you originally thought when you made that investment.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Rick. This has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on again. I do like letting my guests close off though. So here's your opportunity. Say what you would like to the listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me on, Kyle. It's always a pleasure. I hope to be on a couple more of these in the future. But yeah, if you are patient and you're looking for a great base metal opportunity, go to my website, go to barksdaleresources.com, check out the stock, and give me a ring if you have any questions. I'm always available.
Perfect. Thanks, Rick.